her to transform self-love into empathy. Examples of narcissistic types. Narcissistic couple. In 1862, just days before his wedding to Sonia Beers, Leo Tolstoy decided to have no secrets. He brought her his diaries, and she read them. Weeping and getting angry, he wrote about his past love affairs, including his ongoing infatuation with a peasant woman and his gambling. She felt jealous and disgusted. Why did he make her read this? She accused him of having second thoughts, and he accused her of the same. He wanted to share his old ways so she'd understand he was happily forsaking them for a new life with her. Why should she rebuke his honesty? She clearly didn't love him as much as he thought. Why was it painful for her to say goodbye to her family before the wedding? Did she love them more? They reconciled and the wedding took place, but the pattern set for 48 years. Despite their arguments, Sonia's marriage settled into a comfortable rhythm. She became his trusted assistant, bearing 8 children in 12 years, 5 of whom survived. She carefully copied his books, managed the publishing business, and everything seemed to be going well. He was rich, famous, and loved. But suddenly, at 50, he felt immensely unhappy and ashamed of his books. He no longer knew who he was. He was undergoing a deep spiritual crisis and found the Orthodox Church too strict. He decided to change his life. He would no longer write novels and live like a common peasant. Tolstoy, seeking a spiritual life, asked his family to join him in renouncing their property and copyrights on his books. However, his family, led by Sonia, resisted, resenting his demands for change and accusing her of being materialistic. Their conflict left Tolstoy seeing Sonia as a hypocrite. Despite her marriage to him for fame and money, he continued living lavishly, despite his vow of celibacy, and kept making her pregnant. Tolstoy's desire for a simple life was hindered by Sonia's presence, which he found oppressive. He wrote her a letter accusing her of causing his sufferings, and out of his bitterness, he wrote the novella The Kreutzer Sonata, portraying her negatively. Sonia felt increasingly isolated and eventually snapped in 1894, attempting suicide by freezing herself in the snow. A family member rescued her, and she repeated the attempt twice more. The pattern intensified. Tolstoy provoked her, she reacted, he remorsefully apologized, and they reconciled. He granted her wishes, but her actions made him regret it. She manipulated the children, read his diaries secretly, and watched him. He berated her, sometimes fell ill, and regretted his actions. Despite their love, it seemed impossible. In late October 1910, exhausted, Tolstoy secretly left with a doctor friend, determined to end their marriage. Terrified of being caught, he boarded a train and escaped. Sonia attempted suicide again, but was rescued. She wrote him a letter, begging him to return. She promised to change, renounce luxuries, become spiritual, and love him unconditionally. She couldn't live without him. Tolstoy's freedom was short-lived. Newspapers reported his escape. Reporters, fans, and the curious mob followed him. He couldn't bear the crowded and freezing conditions. He fell ill and was taken to a station master's cottage near the tracks in a remote village. In bed, he knew he was dying. He heard Sonia's plea for his return. Arrived in town but couldn't bear seeing her. The family kept her outside, where she watched him die. When he was unconscious, she entered and knelt beside him, kissing him and whispering, "Forgive me." He died soon after. A month later, Sonia visited the Tolstoy house and confessed, "What happened? How could I have done it? You know I killed him." Interpretation: Leo Tolstoy, a deep narcissist. displayed signs of his condition. His mother's death left an indelible void, which he filled through numerous affairs. He acted recklessly in youth, seeking excitement. Disgusted with himself, he created different characters in his novels, reflecting his uncertainty. By age 50, he faced a deep crisis over his fragmented self. Sonia was also self-absorbed. We tend to overemphasize individual traits in people, neglecting the complex impact of each side in a relationship. A relationship has a life and personality, and can be deeply narcissistic, accentuating or even bringing out narcissistic tendencies. What makes a relationship narcissistic is the lack of empathy, which leads partners to retreat into their defensive positions. The Tolstoy's relationship began with Sonia's disapproval of his diary, reflecting their divergent values. Tolstoy, the iconoclastic artist, regretted his marriage proposal to Anna. He believed her reaction showed she couldn't see into his soul or understand his desire for a new life. They misunderstood each other and fell into hardened positions that lasted 48 years. Tolstoy's spiritual crisis exemplified this narcissistic dynamic. He could have seen her reaction. She'd lived comfortably, managed frequent pregnancies and child-rearing, and never been deeply spiritual. Their connection was physical. Why should he expect her to change? His demands were almost sadistic. He could have explained his side without demanding she follow him, even acknowledging her position and needs. That would have shown true spirituality. Instead, she focused on his hypocrisy. She could have seen a man unhappily with himself, never feeling loved enough since childhood, undergoing a real personal crisis. She could have offered love and support while gently declining to follow him. Empathy has the opposite effect of mutual narcissism. It softens the other person and invites empathy. It's hard to stay defensive when the other person sees and expresses your side, entering your spirit. It beckons you to reciprocate. Secretly, people yearn to let go of resistance. It's exhausting to be constantly defensive and suspicious. The key to using empathy in a relationship is to understand the other person's value system, which is different from yours. What they interpret as signs of love or attention, or generosity often diverges from your thinking. These value systems form early in childhood and are unconsciously created. Understanding them allows you to enter their spirit and perspective when you'd normally be defensive. Even deep narcissists can be influenced by rare attention. Measure all relationships on narcissism spectrum. It's the dynamic, not one person, that needs change. 4. The healthy narcissist. The mood reader. In 1915, English explorer Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton abandoned his ship, Endurance, trapped in Antarctic ice for over 8 months. This meant giving up his dream of leading the first Antarctic land crossing, but he had to prioritize the safety of his 27 crew members. To achieve this, he faced challenges like harsh weather, drifting ice, darkness, dwindling food, and radio contact. But the greatest danger was the men's morale. A few malcontents could spread resentment and negativity, causing them to lose faith in his leadership. In such a climate, disaster could be imminent. He had to monitor their group spirit more closely than the changing weather. The leader had to lead by example, hiding his doubts and fears. He rose early, prepared extra hot tea, and served it with humor about their new home and the coming darkness. He didn't discuss his ideas for escaping, knowing it would make them anxious. Instead, he let his optimism show through his manner and body language, even if it was fake. They knew they were trapped for winter and needed distractions to keep their spirits up. He created a daily duty roster, mixing up tasks and groups to prevent boredom. Each day had a simple goal: hunting penguins or seals, bringing supplies from the ship, or constructing a better campground. They could feel a sense of accomplishment by the end of each day. As the days passed, he became attuned to the men's moods. He talked to them about science with the scientists, poetry and composers with the more aesthetic types, and listened to their problems. The cook was particularly upset about having to kill his pet cat because they were out of food. Shackleton volunteered to do it. For the physicist, the hard labor was taking a toll. He ate slowly and sighed wearily at night. When Shackleton spoke to him, his spirit seemed to wane. Without making him feel inadequate, Shackleton reassigned him to lighter tasks. He noticed a few weak links. Frank Hurley, the ship's photographer, was good at his job but needed to feel important. Shackleton sought his opinion on significant matters, complimented his ideas, and assigned him his own tent. Hubert Hudson, the navigator, was self-centered and a terrible listener. Shackleton gave him constant attention and shared his tent. If he suspected others of being latent malcontents, he spread them around. As winter progressed, his attentiveness doubled. He noticed the boredom in the men's behavior and organized sporting events and entertainments to combat it. Every holiday was carefully observed with feasts. The endless drifting days became highlights, and he noticed the men were cheery and enjoying the challenges. One day, the floe they were on became dangerously small. Shackleton ordered the men into 3 small lifeboats salvaged from the Endurance and headed for land. They braved the rough waters and landed on Elephant Island, a narrow beach. The island's conditions were worse than the ice floe. That day, he ordered a risky attempt to reach South Georgia Island, 800 miles to the northeast. The chances were slim, but survival on Elephant Island was impossible. Shackleton carefully chose 5 other men, including Harry McKenny-ish, the ship's carpenter and oldest crew member at 57. Despite McKenny-ish's grumpiness and reluctance to hard labor, Shackleton couldn't leave him behind. He tasked McKenny-ish with fitting out the boat for the trip, giving him personal responsibility for its safety. During the voyage, McKenny-ish's spirits sank, and he stopped rowing. Shackleton sensed danger and didn't yell or order him to row, fearing rebellion in the crowded conditions. Improvising, he stopped the boat and ordered hot milk for everyone, saying they were tired and needed their spirits lifted. McKenny-ish was spared embarrassment. Shackleton repeated this ploy as needed. A storm pushed them back a few miles from their destination. They searched for a new approach to the island when a small bird kept hovering over them, trying to land on their boat. Shackleton struggled to maintain composure but lost it, standing and swinging wildly at the bird while swearing. He felt embarrassed and sat back down. For 15 months, he'd kept his frustrations in check for the men and morale. He'd set the tone. Now wasn't the time to back down. Minutes later, he made a joke at his expense and vowed never to repeat such a display, no matter the pressure. After a journey through some of the world's worst ocean conditions, their tiny boat finally landed at South Georgia Island. Months later, with the help of whalers, all the remaining men on Elephant Island were rescued. Considering the odds, climate, terrain, boats, and resources, it was one of history's most remarkable survival stories. As word spread of Shackleton's leadership, Sir Edmund Hillary said, "For scientific leadership, give me Scott. For swift travel, Amundsen. But when you're in a hopeless situation, pray for Shackleton." When Shackleton led men in desperate circumstances, he understood what would save them: their attitude. It's invisible, rarely discussed, and lacks training manuals. Yet it's the most crucial factor. A slight dip in their spirit could spell doom. Shackleton faced challenges due to cracks in his crew's unity, making it difficult to make decisions. Attempting to escape the ice floe would likely lead to death. In essence, he was thrown back into the primal condition of a group in danger, dependent on each other for survival. This is where our ancestors evolved superior social skills, the uncanny ability to read others' moods and minds, and cooperation. During the sunless months on the ice floe, Shackleton rediscovered these ancient empathic skills. Shackleton's approach should serve as a model. First, he understood the crucial role of his attitude. The leader's mindset infects the group, often through nonverbal cues like body language and tone of voice. He radiated confidence and optimism, which inspired his crew. Second, he divided his attention between individuals and the group. He monitored group dynamics, such as chattiness and mood during work, while reading individual emotions through tone of voice, eating habits, and rising times. He anticipated their actions based on their moods and looked for signs of frustration or insecurity. He treated each person differently, adjusting his readings as moods shifted quickly. Lastly, he had to detect any decline in spirit or negativity. A gentle approach is better than scolding, as it avoids making people feel ashamed and isolated, leading to negative consequences. Instead, engage them in talk, enter their spirit, and find indirect ways to elevate their mood or isolate them without revealing your intentions. As Shackleton practiced this, he improved his skills. In the morning, he could almost predict the man's behavior throughout the day. Some crew members thought he was psychic. Empathic powers develop due to necessity. If we feel our survival depends on gauging others' moods and minds, we'll focus and develop these skills. Normally, we don't need this. We assume we understand people well. Life can be harsh, and we're lazy, preferring pre-digested judgments. However, these skills are crucial for our success. We don't realize this because we don't see the connection between our misreading of people's moods and intentions and missed opportunities. The first step is to realize you have a remarkable social tool you're not using. Try it out. Stop your inner monologue and pay attention to people. Attune yourself to their moods and group dynamics. Understand their psychology and motivations. Take their perspective and enter their world. You will discover a world of nonverbal behavior you never knew existed. Once you sense this power, you will realize its importance and awaken to new social possibilities. I don't ask the wounded person how they feel. I become the wounded person. Walt Whitman.